Welcome to the Surrogacy Warrior. I am your host, Kimberly Surratt. I am an attorney in both Nevada and California. I practice exclusively in assisted reproduction law, which means I am a surrogacy lawyer. The purpose of the Surrogacy Warrior is to go through all the details and minutiae and break down the detailed information that either lawyers, agencies, or clients need regarding the surrogacy process. Join us as we go through our process of interviewing individuals around the United States and around the world, and we dive deep into the surrogacy world. If you'd like more information on myself, Kim Surratt, you can go to my website at www.lawyersforfamilies.com. Hello, everyone. I know we've got people joining us and they're clicking in. And so we'll give it a moment. We'll let everybody join us. And but we might as well do some of the casual stuff till we get there, right, Heather?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So my friend Heather, we're here to talk about Arizona. But first, I want you to talk about yourself, which, is always a challenge for some of us lawyers, believe it or not. For those listening, you probably think all lawyers can talk about themselves, but tell us more about yourself, Heather.
All right. Well, I am a Tucson native. Proud to be born and raised here. So I've made Arizona my permanent home. And I'm married. I've got two middle schoolers, which keeps me super busy as a working mom. Focus my practice entirely on adoption and assisted reproduction here. And while I'm located in Tucson, I do serve the entire state of Arizona. So if I ever find free time, which is pretty rare, I really do love cooking, hanging out in my garden. And I'm an avid opera fan, and I'm really proud to be on the board of trustees for Arizona Opera.
Everybody listening, I went to my first opera because of Heather. So I am not an avid opera fan. I have to learn it. It's a skill I don't have as a Nevada girl. But I love my natives. I love it. Arizona is very much like Nevada, where being native means something. It has importance to it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So for everybody that's watching, you're probably wondering, okay, what's going to happen here? We're a little bit vague. We're just going to do a deep dive on Arizona, but we really are. The intent here is to dissect Arizona surrogacy law, really get into the weeds a little bit here with Heather and get to understand it a little better. To kind of start the conversation, Heather, I have to read this email to you. This was verbatim words from an agency, not an Arizona agency, to my clients, that my clients expressed a little concern about Arizona law for their surrogacy. They are a same-sex couple from outside of the United States, and they weren't sure if they were going to have to adopt their child in Arizona. They were asking all the right questions, but they said, we don't know if we have to do a second parent adoption. And the agency's response was that everything they wrote was false information. Surrogacy contracts are not prohibited in Arizona. There's just no surrounding law regarding them, no statutes on it. In other words, the legislature in the state of Arizona is silent on surrogacy contracts, but the contract is mainly about duties and money, so you don't need to worry about that. And then they go on to say they've had lots of successful ones. Our couples are using Arizona surrogates, are working all with California attorneys, because in that state, the contracts are valid in all states in the United States. So you're probably having a heart attack right now.
Can we start drinking, please?
Okay,
right?
Everybody that's watching, this is meant to be casual. I put it in the comments, but I don't know that anybody listened, but we do have our glasses of wine. So that's just the starter. So let's break it down now. Arizona have statutes?
Arizona has one. All right.
What does that one statute say?
Yes. So here is the challenge. So there's no doubt about it. Surrogacy in Arizona is complicated. It's not impossible. It's just complicated. And it's so important that you have legal guidance at the start so that you can figure out what is the best pathway through this. So Arizona does have one statute about surrogacy. We are unfortunately one of the few states that has a statute that specifically prohibits people from entering into, and this is a quote, surrogate parentage contracts. So what makes us different, though, is that we don't criminalize entering into surrogate parentage contracts. So it's not as if the police are going to come banging on your door because you've entered into the contract. And I've had people tell, or even have lawyers tell clients that the Department of Child Safety was going to come take their baby away because they had a baby through surrogacy. That's not the case. What
That's
it
general education issue of, is it a family law attorney?
Yes, it was a family law attorney, right?
Law.
Right. So, because people always say to me, but surrogacy is illegal in Arizona. And that's really not the proper way to phrase it. There are no criminal consequences to entering into a contract, but we have a very explicit public policy prohibition. Our legislature responded this was back in 1994, was responding some pretty scandalous stories that were happening in the nation, the kind of stuff that was making the cover of People magazine. And they really wanted to dissuade people from entering into these contracts. So they wrote a statute that says that no one shall enter into these kinds of contracts. But they didn't make it an illegal or a criminal activity. But what we're left with, though, is we have this public policy prohibition against contracts. So if you enter into a contract that's governed by Arizona law, not necessarily other state laws, but governed by Arizona law, it's very likely that our courts won't enforce its terms. Why would you need to go to a court to have your contract terms enforced? Well, if you have controversy between you and your gestational carrier, or your gestational carrier has controversy with you, and then the second part of your journey, having you established as parents. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about that, but those are typically why people go to court with the contract. It's because they want it, and they want it enforced because they're having trouble or there's a controversy. And the second part is because they want to become the parents.
So to pull that out into an example, the intended parents have quit making their payments to the carrier. Carrier needs to go to court, claim a breach of contract, force the intended parents to pay her. They're not going to get that relief in Arizona using a contract in the state of Arizona.
Probably not. And
Okay.
Part of the problem is that it's never been tested.
Right.
And you don't want to be the test case.
That's my favorite phrase, right? I use it all the time. I'm like, you don't want to be the one.
You don't want to be the one. And so there's options. And I think that's what people need to realize is we have options and opportunities to craft your surrogacy journey in a way that's going to give you more protections. So you don't have this concern hanging over your head that we have a beautiful 40-page contract, but is not enforceable. Let's change that. There are ways that we can change that. And it's easier to set up your journey so that you can have a court enforceable contract the earlier in the process that you start talking to the lawyers about what's the best legal strategy here.
So what about enforceability of donor agreements?
This is where our laws are silent. We've got nothing.
So that's a true answer. That's a true statement on that part of it. Yeah.
Right. So we have hints in our laws in various areas that suggest that at least our legislature was not offended by the idea that a family might be formed using donated gametes. But they haven't gone so far as to give us the statutes that very clearly say somebody is a sperm donor and therefore they're not a parent, or somebody is an egg donor and therefore they're not a parent. They just haven't, we just don't have that nice crystal clear.
Right. But yet you're the only state that has one when it comes to disposition and a divorce, right?
Right. Yes. And so that's one of our hints that the suggestion that
They
our
want to do
legislature
with it,
was
right?
not completely offended by the idea that people would be creating embryos, because they were obviously concerned about how are we going to divvy up embryos in the event of a divorce and potentially conflict between for soon to be formerly married spouses.
So those of you that don't know about that statute, Arizona has a statute in a divorce action in a contested dispute over embryos that they will be granted to the party most likely to bring, what's the language, to bring it
Oh, I have to look it up.
to life? Or I can't remember exactly.
I think it's to give the embryo the opportunity to develop to life.
Develop to life.
But here's the scary part about that. It's not just if they have controversy. The way the statute is drafted, it's in all instances, even if the parties agree, it says the court shall award the embryos in this particular way.
Against their wishes.
Yeah, now I can't imagine a judge would want to do that, but again, the language is there, and so there's risk that the court could decide that they believe to interpret the statute that says that they have to do this no matter what you all want, even if you're agreeing and you have no conflict.
Gotcha. Okay, so for everybody listening, and quite honestly, I mean, our participant list, we pretty much know everybody on that participant list. But so you're clear, I do
Hello,
not
friends.
license. Exactly. I do not have an Arizona license. I am not licensed in Arizona. So I'm just pulling out of Heather everything that we want and need so that we know what we're doing with Arizona. So, okay. So we went through, we've got that statute, the issue of the enforceability of the contracts. So how do you deal with contracts in Arizona?
How do we deal with contracts? Well, most of the time, I'm advising people to let's plan your journey in such a way that you can create enough of a connection with another state to use that state's laws to govern your gestational carrier agreement. And so typically it's, can we find you a gestational carrier in a state that has better laws than us? Or can we find a clinic in a state that has laws that allow you to use those states' laws for the purposes of your gestational carrier agreement, just by virtue of you doing the transfer there. And gotcha. Because sometimes people come to me and they've already matched with their gestational carrier. It's a sister, it's a friend, it's, or somebody that they've known for a long time, and or they've met and fallen in love before anybody ever talked to a lawyer. And so there are times when you have intended parents in Arizona and a gestational carrier in Arizona, and we're left with only the option of going to a clinic out of state. So, and it's not every state, it's only some of.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to that scenario at the beginning, because I am licensed in California and I am licensed in Nevada. To be really clear, that statement that California orders are good no matter what in any surrogacy matter is not a true statement. Both of those states will take jurisdiction if the carrier resides in that state, the baby's born in that state, expected to be born in that state, the intended parents reside there, the contract is entered into there, or the fertility clinic is there. More language than fertility clinic in the statute, but so, for agencies that are listening in, your California orders are not the be all end all for everything. And I got a license there, so I can safely say that, but we still have to have a connection for us to help Heather in Arizona. And so, okay, so with that connection.
And Kim, can we be clear? Are we talking about the gestational carrier agreement, or are we talking about the parentage orders? Because we haven't really gotten to the parentage orders yet.
We haven't talked about the parentage orders yet. So yeah, with just the contract, just the gestational carrier agreement. Now, if we utilize another state, knowing that you may be doing parentage in Arizona, but we're using another state, say, use the fertility clinic in Nevada, and I did a contract in Nevada, are there contractual terms that we need to be stressed out about for you for your parentage stage?
The answer to that is actually no, because I never present the contract to an Arizona court, because I'm not I do not go to our courts asking the court to enforce the terms of that gestational carrier agreement. We are going to court and we're filing an old-fashioned paternity and maternity action. And we ask the court to follow the genetics. And then in the case where we may have some donated egg or donated sperm, we ask the court to follow marital presumption, because Arizona does have a marital presumption. So grant parentage based on the fact that somebody has a genetic connection or they are married to the person with the genetic connection to the child. So that means we do have some limitations then, not much, but we do have some limitations on which couples can get parentage orders in Arizona. Yeah.
So the key you just said was genetics.
Genetics. At least one has to have a genetic connection if they're a married couple. And if they're not married, but they both have a genetic connection, we can get a parentage order. But if you have anyone, like a single person who has no genetic connection to the child, I'm not going to be able to get you a parentage order here. Or if you have an unmarried couple, I can get you the parentage order for the one with the genetic connection, but not for the one that's without, and then because we don't have a marriage to rely on. Okay.
So in those scenarios, if you're relying on another jurisdiction and we get the parentage in the other jurisdiction, prohibitions for Arizona on utilizing that order?
Arizona Vital Records will give it full faith and credit. They know this. The Attorney General, who is in charge of Vital Records, is fantastic. A lot of attorneys who practice in this area are on a first name basis with her. She really is wonderful. But where we're seeing problems, and this is the kind of thing that has ebbs and flows, is not with Vital Records, but with the hospitals themselves and the hospital staffs. You can imagine, I mean, this is an area where there's so much misinformation and misunderstanding. People get really scared because they do think something illegal is going on. And so sometimes we have hospitals that won't enforce the terms of, won't recognize a parent via a court order that's coming from another state. And so, you know, this is where we should have a conversation about what hospital is going to be the delivery hospital, because there are times when it makes absolute sense to domesticate your out-of-state order, so that we have an Arizona court agreeing to register it here and then saying that it's going to be enforced.
And for those that are listening, agency wise, I mean, the registration process, tell us for Arizona. For Nevada, it's mostly about the filing fee. It's mostly about making the money, right? But is the process difficult to register it there?
It's not that it's difficult, but it is. We have to file. There's a lot of pleadings we actually have to file. We have to file a certified copy of the out-of-state judgment. And then I have to file a separate motion asking the court to not just register it, but now I want you to say that they need to, you need to enforce it. So it's not that but it does take time. I mean, it's probably a 4 to 6 week process to get it domesticated and get those certified orders in people's hands, saying that, okay, we've registered this out-of-state order and it's enforced here, and it's to be enforced here in Arizona. So
for a lot of states, that difference about whether or not you need to register it is rural counties versus metropolis, metro areas. Is that the same in Arizona, or does that trend not apply?
Yeah, that trend fits for Arizona.
Okay.
And you know, I think sometimes we have to remember Arizona is really big, and then we sort of have this central corridor with our big cities, with Tucson, Phoenix, Flagstaff, but the stuff on the sides, pretty rural, pretty conservative. And so sometimes that is where we tend to see the problems with hospitals not being willing to enforce the terms of an out-of-state judgment. So it is worth the phone call to an attorney to say, hey, this is where we're having this delivery. What do you think? Because it also changes over time too. You might have so many births that go just fine in a particular hospital, and then there's a staff change. So,
Right. Okay. So tell me a little bit about, you started to touch on what you need to do for pleadings. I mean, we just talked about the registration process, but for parentage, when you have jurisdiction and you can do it in Arizona,
okay.
what does that process look like for people?
If the baby is going to be born, we can do the parentage order in Arizona. If the intended parents live in Arizona, we can do the parentage order in Arizona. So the process is, it's filing a petition to establish paternity and maternity, or non-paternity and non-maternity, whatever the combination we have to do is. And so it's pleadings, but we also have to get an affidavit from the doctor outlining the procedure that took place that led to the pregnancy. All the pleadings have to be signed by the intended parents and the gestational carrier and her spouse if she has one. So these are all things that, again, take time and are logistics. And then we get it filed with the court. And for the most part, the courts are going to give us a signed order because this is not a conflict. There's no controversy. They're going to give us a signed order in about 2 to 3 weeks from the time we file it.
Do you have to have wet signatures, or can you use electronic signatures or remote notarization?
Depends on the county we're filing in.
Okay.
So, yeah, it really does depend on the county. So where we can, of course, we will do electronic signatures if we can, but sometimes we do have to have the wet ink. So
when we say wet ink, for those listening, original signatures,
originals,
original ink signatures in hand.
Yeah, signed in blue, preferably, because then we all know.
That's true, except for in Nevada, if it's the Secretary of State's office, you got to be using black ink. So
oh, gee, okay. Yeah.
I know, silly stuff, right?
I mean, my staff and I, we all get our notary stamps in green because that's the way we know it's an original notary stamp. So.
Exactly. And we can't do that here, actually. That's one of the other rules. Yeah. So
okay.
Differences between states. So filing fees, are they expensive in Arizona? Are they different, wildly different around the state, or the same?
They're not wildly different around the state, but they're over $300. And sometimes they want you to also file the response fee. Again, it depends on the county. So it varies a little bit. I tell most people that if you budget $1,000 for the costs for the parentage order, and that's also to cover the notary, runner service, certified copies, you're in a good place if you budget $1,000. There's probably some of that's going to come back to you, but I think that's a safe number. So okay.
Now the birth certificates are.
Oh wait, before we go there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about pre-birth versus post-birth.
Oh, please do. Yes. Please do.
So things have definitely evolved and changed. When I first started doing this, getting an order before the birth was rare. Now getting the order before the birth is standard. But at the end of the day, it always is in the judge's discretion. So there can be a judge that might say, I'm fine signing this, but not until after the baby is born. But that's really rare these days. But I'm also hearing, especially from agencies, that there is more interest in obtaining an order post-birth. So we get the order, right? So we get a confirmatory order, one that has more details in it. And we certainly can do that. It is an additional filing fee, not as high, but it is an additional filing fee, and more, and more certified copies. So can be done, but we need to know that that is what you want to have happen. But ahead of time, yes. Most of the time, the parentage orders are being issued before birth. Occasionally, they're being issued after birth. So it just, most of the time we're going to be just fine, but people do need to occasionally be prepared that it might come afterwards, especially if you're not
Will your
starting
judges
early
allow
enough.
you to do both, a pre and a post, both?
Yeah, the judges will sign the birth the parents' order pre-birth, and then they'll sign a confirmatory order after the birth has taken place.
Okay. Is that venue specific, or, I mean, depending on which judge you're in front of, or is that kind of?
It's been so rare. It's not something I can't really generalize on that yet. I'm sure I'll be doing it a lot more.
It's getting more frequent. I mean, I do it a significant amount.
Yeah.
Because life's easier at the hospital with a pre-birth order, but if their country they're returning home to, it's a post-birth,
Right.
then I prefer to get both so that I make their life easier on the front end, but they still go home what they need on the back end.
Right.
Oh, okay. So on the birth certificate though, same gender couples, any problems with the birth certificates?
I wouldn't call it a problem. It's just a two-step process for same-sex couples. And the reason why has to do with the field identifier. Are you identified as a mother or are you identified as a father? And would you prefer to be identified as a parent and parent? So we can place or have the court order place both names on the birth record at birth, if that's what they want. Of course, I recognize that some people coming from other countries may not want that. But the field identifier coming out is going to say mother and father. And so if you have two people of the same gender, pick one. I don't know who's going to, get to be the mother, who's going to be the father. We then have to make an appointment with Arizona Vital Records for them to go and have it modified so that it says parent.
Gotcha.
So
okay, I didn't know that part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
and so when they make the new birth certificate, is it amended? Does it say amended on it, or is it
it's not.
just a replacement birth certificate?
Yes, it's a replacement. Yep.
That makes people a lot happier. They don't like that amended birth certificate language.
Right.
Okay. So then on the apostilles, everybody
Apostilles, I don't know.
we just did a presentation with the ABA and they call it apostilles, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to be calling it that. I've never called it that. But anyways, that process in Arizona, is it through your Secretary of State?
Through the Secretary of State. So used to be you could just go to the counter, no appointment. COVID shut that down, and then it had to be all by mail. They've now gone back to the ability to go in person, but you have to have an appointment. And it can sometimes be 4 to 5 weeks from the time you go to schedule the appointment before you can get the appointment slot. So it's up in the Phoenix area. It's a lot longer to get the apostille or apostille appointment. I guess I'm going to have to look up how to pronounce that. And so sometimes it's faster to do it by mail, which is usually about 20 days. Sometimes it's faster to actually get the in-person appointment. Sometimes if we know an induction date, we'll get on the website and we'll make the appointment in anticipation of a birth. So, we do what we can to be able to get those documents fully complete and in the hands of the intended parents before they leave the country if we can. Otherwise, FedEx is just making a lot of money off of us.
Because in Phoenix is the only office. Is that what you're
saying?
No,
we have an office in Tucson as well.
Oh, there is one in Tucson. Okay.
Yeah. And that's the Secretary of State office. Yeah.
What about Flagstaff?
I don't know. That would surprise me if they do, because Flagstaff is relatively small.
Okay. So more than one office for it. What about US passport office? Is there a primary office there, or just the what do they call them? The subsidiary ones?
I don't know what we have a passport office here. When you say subsidiary, do you mean like it's operated by a third party?
No, state of Nevada does not have a passport office. You go to the post office, they sign off on the documents, be mailed to a post office or to a passport office in Los Angeles primarily.
Okay.
But we don't have one here in the States. So
okay, we do. It's actually in Tucson.
Okay.
So Yeah, because of our proximity to Mexico.
Oh, well, that makes a lot more sense. Got it.
Yes. I know a lot of people are like, why didn't they put
Oh,
in Phoenix? Well, because we're right
it sounds
closer to
closer.
Mexico. Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right. So, big picture though, I mean, numbers, has it been changing in Arizona? Are you seeing more surrogates?
Um, you know, the answer is yes. Uh, and I would say too, our judges are a lot more comfortable with this because it is becoming more common. But it's not just becoming more common because it's what they're seeing in their courtrooms. It's also what they're seeing on social media, what they're seeing on television, stories they're seeing in the news, things like that. I mean, building your family like this is just becoming more common. Um, because of our prohibition against surrogate parentage contracts, I and our oftentimes my weird business model of referring people to others to say, don't use Arizona law to govern this. Go to my friends over here. There are a lot of cases I just don't see.
Yes.
So I think because of our proximity to California, we're seeing a lot more. But it's also very possible to have quite a lot of surrogates or gestational carriers here in Arizona that never talk to an Arizona lawyer because the contract's being entered into another state, the parentage order is being obtained in a different state, and so they have no reason for Arizona counsel
Until they have that registration issue, right?
until the registry, right? Until there's the registration issue, or with the hospital not recognizing or enforcing the terms of the parentage order.
So on that is the key advice that agencies and lawyers that where the order was obtained in another state should be getting that to the hospital as soon as possible to find out if the hospital is going to force them to register or not.
I'm not, that's the thing. In the cases I've heard about, they've filed it or they've handed it to the hospital ahead of time, and the hospital didn't tell them that they were going to have any issues until
Oh, right then. Oh,
right then. So
oh,
it's
nice.
probably better to pick up the phone and to the Arizona attorney and say, am I going to have any problems? um, so
So let's talk about the nasty topic, abortion in Arizona.
okay. Can
Which
we
I know
can we
it's a
grab
hot
that wine
topic.
again?
Yep, back to drinking. Those are you that are not drinking. Next time you join me, make sure you have a glass of wine. All right.
Or Pellegrino. I have Pellegrino.
Or Pellegrino. All right. So
So,
abortion ban in Arizona. What's the
okay.
what's the
I will.
greatest?
What's the latest and greatest? The last 6 months were horrible. It was changing all the time. It would change on a Friday. It would change on a Tuesday. I mean, it was really nasty here. Where we are right now is Arizona has a 15-week ban. There are no abortions after 15 weeks of gestation. You layer that though on top of we have an abortion ban where you cannot seek an abortion for a genetic abnormality. And, or sorry, let me rephrase it, for a lethal or non-lethal genetic abnormality. And they define non-lethal as the child will survive for 3 months or more after birth. So you can imagine that there's a lot of genetic abnormalities, such as spina bifida, cystic fibrosis, Down syndrome, that probably won't meet the definition of lethal because the child will likely survive more than 3 months after birth. So in those instances, she's nobody's going to be able to seek an abortion because due to the genetic abnormality. So, and this,
Going to take some serious expert testimony and all kinds of contested.
yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, exactly. I mean, and
like a lot of these states, it's going to come down to the doctor's comfort level with it, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah.
And the other thing is at 15 weeks, since you have to make this decision at 15 weeks, are we even going to know? Is anybody going to even know enough to be able to make the determination if this is a lethal or non-lethal genetic abnormality? So, so that's where we stand right now. It is also a felony to solicit someone to have an abortion. So we have to be really careful about that as well.
So contracts in Nevada, surrogates in Arizona, intended parents reside somewhere else. But they asked their Arizona surrogate to have an abortion that meets the definition of soliciting.
Good. Yeah.
Illegal.
Yeah. And so this is the problem, is that we have this law that says this. What does that mean? How is it going to be enforced? And none of us know. And so it's just, it is really scary because we don't have answers. So
those listening, Arizona is always, it's considered a hot ground for finding surrogates right now, but you need to be excruciatingly careful.
Yeah.
That 15 weeks comes fast. It comes really fast.
And there's so many tests now that can be done, but that you won't be able to complete, or you won't have the results before you hit that 15-week mark.
Hit the 15-week mark. Yeah. So you got to decide if you're really going to put these surrogates in danger or not.
Right. So we are, of course, surrounded by California, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico. All these places can be reached in about 4 to 6 hours by car. So
do you have some confidence though in that travel? I mean, there's still that little risk that by asking her to travel, you've solicited an abortion, but the procedure wasn't in Arizona.
Right. And that's always the risk, right? But I mean, she could also make the decision of her own volition that she is going to travel and seek abortion services elsewhere. So.
Okay. We had a question early on that I didn't see till now. If a surrogacy contract has a choice of law provision for a state other than Arizona, will Arizona courts apply the other state's law to enforce the contract?
I wouldn't want to test that out here.
It hasn't been tested, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't try it. I mean, it really says no one shall enter into a surrogate parentage contract. And I think you run the risk of Arizona court saying, I get it, you entered into this under another state's law, but we're not even going to hear this because this contract is void against our public policy. Yeah.
Yeah, going back to that scenario I gave at the beginning from that agency saying, oh, well, California orders, their contracts are good everywhere and they're valid everywhere. Not true. I mean, if we're talking about the validity of a contract, public policy is still going to kick in there for enforcement in that state. We're talking about court orders. For those that are not lawyers that are listening, yes, we have full faith and credit. The U.S. Constitution tells us that these orders should be enforced in other states, but we have states flat out saying no.
Right.
That has not been challenged. It's not something where a surrogacy contract or agreement or court order has been taken up to the U.S. Supreme Court or, for decent case law to tell us, yes, you are violating full faith and credit on that.
Right.
We have other cases. We have some very interesting case law out there on full faith and credit, but for agencies that are listening, don't give that advice. That paragraph I read at the beginning was legal advice. It was terrible. Don't do it.
Refer to the lawyers. Say, can you please talk to your lawyer?
Yeah. And if you have couples that are very or have a heightened fear of needing an abortion or having had fertility problems and testing issues or genetic issues, don't. Arizona may not be a good idea. Heather and I are both fans of sometimes it's just not the right state. It's time to move them on.
And that's okay. I mean, it really is okay. And they just need to find a different match. So
yeah. We have another question. How long does it take to obtain a post-birth order in Arizona?
It's going to depend on the judge, but I would put it at a couple of weeks. But I would say the chances that we're going to have a post-birth order in our hand before a family leaves the country, since they're typically here about 4 weeks, I'd put that on the lower end. We might have to FedEx it to them, and definitely if it needs to be apostille or apostille.
Apostilles, I know.
Apostilles. If it
Just
needs
an
to be
apostille.
apostilled, then the family's going to be heading home and we'll have to just FedEx it to them. So
But what about the pre-birth? Same kind of time frame
for getting the order,
when you file it to when you get the order?
when you file it to the time you get the order is about 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have more questions? We'll take more questions. I love the questions.
I'm worried that we're talking people out of using Arizona. And once again, I
No,
have my crazy
can use it.
business model of talking people out of using my services.
For all listening though, it makes her a damn good lawyer. That's my opinion. Because she's straight up with you and she's honest about it. But what else about Arizona do we need to worry about or know about?
Oh, goodness.
You don't have to come up with something.
Yeah. No, I feel like
Someone else wrote, oh, how quickly can you get birth certificates?
so birth certificates, right, the first one right after birth, usually you can, if you go in person to either the state office or the actually human attended county offices, you're going to be able to get it within 7 days of birth. If you're needing a modified version or an amended version, it depends on how quickly we're going to be able to get your appointment with vital records to make that amendment. Typically, they've been able to give us appointments about 2 weeks after birth. So
when you said human, so the county ones, they're manning them, they're not having remote.
it depends on the county. So, and the problem is you'll see the list and you'll go, oh, look, there's a county office over here in Yavapai. Well, Yavapai County, I'm just going to go there. And the families go and it's a kiosk and you drop it in the mail. So, human attended county offices, you can walk in and get them. So, we just need to be able to tell you which ones actually have human attendance.
Is the state office in Tucson or Phoenix?
The state office is in Phoenix.
In Phoenix. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why Arizona confuses me with that sometimes, but
but Phoenix and Tucson were only 2 hours, about 2 hours
close.
apart. So
Yeah.
And frankly, a lot of these gestational carriers are in some pretty rural areas. So we've got families that are driving all over the place. Just consider it part of the tour of Arizona. Stop off at the Grand Canyon.
Go see the Grand Canyon. Exactly.
Yeah. Part of the journey. It's part of the story about how you came to be. So.
All right. Any other questions from our audience? Those were good questions. Oh, I do see some more. I didn't scroll down enough. I have a surrogate that resides in Oregon, however, will be moving to Arizona. We love these questions, right?
Yes.
She currently has an Oregon ACA policy. Any concerns with Arizona ACA policies?
I honestly am not qualified to answer that. I am just not going to be able to tell you.
Next question. This has been so very helpful. Thank you so much. That's not a question. That's a great
thank you.
beautiful song in Oregon, one of our favorites.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, Arizona, well, with insurance, as usual, we always give that nice staple answer. Speak to one of the brokers who are very familiar with it. But you don't have any laws like we passed in Nevada that says you have to cover surrogacy because you don't even have enough.
We're not going to even acknowledge you're doing it, right? And
Exactly.
people say it all the time to me. They say, well, what do the contract terms need to be to comply with Arizona law? It's like, there are none because you're not supposed to be doing it in the first place. At least, that's what the legislature wants to avoid. So.
Right. So, but that, I guess my concern on that abortion front is exactly that. Putting into my Nevada contract abortion terms, knowing the surrogate lives in Arizona, that's some major heartburn there. Mainly because that solicitation part of your statute.
Yeah.
The criminal parts of it.
And it is, intended parents, nobody wants 3 lawyers involved in all this. And I understand that. But if you have a gestational carrier who's going to be entering into a contract under another state's law, it probably makes sense for her to have a team, an attorney who's licensed in the state that's going to govern the laws that are going to govern the agreement, and in Arizona, so she can get the information about what's the current status of, again, abortion laws here. And what's the parentage order process, because she should know what that is too. But also she is going to be signing a waiver of Arizona law in her contract that's going to be governed by another state. So she should know what is it that exactly that she's waiving, so that you really have an informed waiver from her.
Right.
But I
Especially,
know nobody really wants to pay for that third attorney, and I understand that.
but with this abortion issue, I don't know that you can't. I don't know that
Yeah.
it's safe not to. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, gang? I love all the names we've got. We love all of you, and we appreciate you joining us today. Heather, thank you so much. I know Arizona is just one of those mystified things sometimes, but it really isn't. It is possible. So for those of you that are listening, I am going to do some other states. We are going to be doing, I'm going to do Utah here soon, and Idaho and Washington. I'm covering the West Coast first, obviously, which is a good percentage of who's on our list. Although I did see Joseph in New York, so we're not all West Coasters on this presentation today. But thank you. We appreciate you, and thank
You're
you
so
everybody for
welcome.
joining us.
Thank you, and hello, friends. So nice to. I'm sorry I can't see all of you, but it's so nice to see those friendly names.
All right, everybody. Goodbye.